Well, I gotta say, I'm pretty excited for this one. A bit of background on this run first. When I first played Elden Ring, one weapon type I ended up using a lot on my first playthrough was the claws. They worked great with their speedy attacks to proc statuses on my foes, and ever since using them, I've wanted to try them out in the other games. Because after all, what are claws but knives attached to my hands? But I especially wanted to try them in Dark Souls 2. This is due to a few reasons, but the main two are power stancing and how effective status ailments are. I also at times find Dark Souls 2's combat a little bit slow, so I wanted to give a really fast weapon type a try and see how it holds up. The rules are pretty straightforward here. The aim is to beat the whole game with claw damage only, but because of the location of the first claw weapon, there's going to be one exception which I'll go into shortly. So let's dive right into it. After waking up with an absolutely raging hangover, I give our character an extremely imaginative name and then create an absolutely stunning specimen to lead us through our journey. Margaret, Susan and Marion all told me that this game is hard and I was going to die a lot, and then we arrive in one of the most beautiful scenic areas in the whole series, Majula. After standing in front of the sun and performing a gesture so I could put a clip of it at this point in the video, we speak to the Emerald Herald, who gives us a most likely useless item. I don't know, I've never worked out what it does. Let me know in the comments below if any of you nice folk found out what it's used for. I'm at a total loss. Now we need to acquire a claw type weapon ASAP with as few bosses as possible, so our first stop is High's Tower of Flame. Is there actually any flame here? I was able to kill this first boss using a cunning strategy. I told him there was a dragon for him to ride down this hole, but actually it was a trick. It was actually a swan waiting to peck him to death. Because Dark Souls 2 is very kind with the level up costs, we get quite a few stat boosts from his 12,000 souls, and then we run through to No Man's Wharf. Now, remember I said there would be one exception to the claw damage rule? Well, it's this. The earliest claw we can get is the malformed claw, which is dropped by these suspicious shadows. However, they have quite a bit of health for this point in the game, and the drop rate is pretty low, so in the interest of speeding this up and getting to the actual good stuff, I'm allowed to use a normal weapon to farm them. After about 20 runs of killing the two of them, we finally get a drop, which was not what I wanted. Another 20 or so runs later, and at last one of them drops the malformed claws. I was initially planning to get two to power stance them, but I think I'll make do with one for now because that just took way too long. The claw looks like some kind of giant pincer. It's not the best damage or moveset, but it will do for now. I also grabbed the fragrant branch of yore and the royal soldier ring. There's a couple of other early game chores to do, like getting fleeced by this woman for 2,000 souls, and enabling Lenegras to be lazy and not solve his own problems. He at least lets us reinforce our malformed claw to +3, and we then speed through to Huntsman's Copse as we want to get to Earthen Peak ASAP to set our build up proper. The enemies appear to have taken a large dose of speed. Merciless Rowena in particular was so dosed up she was able to break the laws of physics and change her momentum in mid-air to hit me. After I attempted to stock up on life gems before the Skeleton Lords, I remembered that Melantia won't move to Majula to become Water Melantia until I've killed the last giant, so let's go take out old Wholeface. With our +3 malformed claw, this doesn't last very long, and we've now got ourselves unlimited life gems for purchase. With a good stock, we can finally take on the Skeleton Lords. Once we get past them, it's pretty smooth sailing from then on out, but our damage is a little on the low side for this fight. Each time one of the 3 Skeleton Lords dies, they summon some additional skeletons to attack us. They're not too tough to handle, but this has started to highlight for me a likely problem with claw weapons: durability, as in lack thereof. The durability of this weapon goes down very fast, and I actually nearly ran out by the time this fight finished. I didn't bring any repair powder, but luckily I finished them off just before it broke. I would definitely need to get a stock of that for later, or I could end up boned. With the Skeleton Lords down, we level up some more stats and speak to Titanite Tina to get her back to Majula, and then venture further into Harvest Valley. Stop shooting fireballs at me! There's a lot of items in this area, but the first thing we need is this poison stone right here. We're nearly at Earthen Plateau Peak, but we've got this Star Wars copyright claim to take care of first. Easy as always, but it's pretty alarming that a +3 weapon does less damage than a frickin' throwing knife. Now, just to note, these mannequins can drop the mannequin claws, which actually might be the best claw weapons in the game, but I'm not going to spend another minute farming here, so instead we head for the laddersmith Gilligan's Island. He fleeces us for 2,000 souls for a useless ladder, but he does now become a merchant, and we can finally get what we came for. the claw. In fact, 2 claws. That's right, we are power stancing, baby. We've easily got the stats, and these things look awesome. I've never actually done a proper power stance playthrough, so I will be doing that for the remainder of this one. Now, we've got a whole bunch of setup to do. First, there's another poison stone here I'm going to grab. You probably already have an idea of what I plan to do, but stay with me. I buy more Titanite shards to get both claws up to +3. The next step is to kill the pursuer. The damage here isn't great, but at least our attacks are fast. It took a solid 5 minutes to do, but at least it was pretty easy thanks to how much Circle Strafing completely chucks his moveset. We flush him down the toilet straight into the pursuer and take a trip via this Lord of the Rings plot hole to the Lost Bastille. With the dull ember in hand, I test out the claws on an enemy that can be bled, and yeah, this was pretty sweet actually. I like the speed and bleed. We play a bit of Donkey Kong and blow the wall to McDuffman. By giving him the dull ember, he now sells large Titanite shards, but also he can infuse our weapons. Using those poison stones, I infuse both claws with poison. Their overall damage will be a bit less, but they keep their innate bleed for now, so I have 2 speedy weapons that can inflict both bleed and poison. I've no doubt there's going to be a bunch of comments saying that resins are better, but I can't use them on both claws and infusions are cool, so shut up. Oh yeah, these claws shred through these guys. Nowhere to run and hide now. Even those that resist poison and bleed get taken down quite quick. I know this won't be the case as the game progresses, but still nice to see. My son tried to grab the controller at one point and accidentally hit the left trigger, leading me to discover I have this awesome spinning blade dance move as well. This just keeps getting better. I'm a little more vulnerable while doing this move, but still nice to have options. I shred through all the enemies in this area, including Ian the guard dragon, which was an absolute piece of Drake. Oh wait, wrong video. Anyway, Ian dies in midair from the poison, so we get this unique death animation. With the souls we've collected here, I can level up both poison claws to +6. But guess what, we're not done. I head into Harvest Valley to grab those 2 Titanite chunks, followed by grabbing a third back here in Huntsman's Copse from this crystal lizard. I then detour to the Shaded Woods, first to grab the Chloranthy Ring +1, light the bonfire here, and then jump for this chest to grab yet another Titanite chunk, bringing us up to 4 in total. I now return to Majula and speak to Titanite Tina to buy this bonfire ascetic, which means we now have 2 in total, including the one we chose for our starting gift. For those that might not know, bonfire ascetics can be burnt at a bonfire to cycle their area forward to New Game Plus and beyond. This is especially useful in Dark Souls 2, as there are many items that only appear in these later cycles, or, more importantly for us, some items spawn in greater quantities. Remember the 2 Titanite chunks we grabbed from Harvest Valley earlier? Well, in New Game Plus, there's a total of 4 Titanite chunks instead in that very same place. With 2 bonfire ascetics, that means I can get 8 chunks from this area in total. There is just one problem though. For some reason, this bonfire only lets you cycle it forward when you've beaten Mitha, despite the fact that she isn't the closest boss to this bonfire, Covetous Demon is. I'm not sure what the logic is, but we need to go do that quickly before we can proceed. I burn this metal windmill to drain the poison, and heads up, it's time for Mitha. She's immune to poison as you might imagine. She actually heals herself in the little poison pool around the arena. In fact, if I'm attacking her with a poison infused weapon, shouldn't that heal her? Well, anyway, she is vulnerable to bleed, so we can stack up some extra damage that way. Historically, I sometimes struggle surviving this severed serpent, but it wasn't too bad apart from taking a bit longer than usual. With her defeated, we can now burn the bonfire ascetic and grab ourselves 4 Titanite chunks. We burn another one, and then grab another 4, so now at last we have 12 in total. But guess what? We're still not done. Further into the poison of Harvest Valley is a Titanite slab, which we grab to increase our stab, and then we return to Forest of the Fallen Giants to grab another slab. With all that done, we've got both our poison claws up at +10 before even killing a great one. Now, the real fun can begin. There are still a few further ways to improve this build, but I want to test the claws out as they are now, so let's take on Ornstein Cosplayer. He's susceptible to both bleed and poison, and honestly, it shows here. Bleed does a flat 200 HP damage when procced, which only takes a few hits, and poison does damage over time when activated. With both of these combined, any boss that isn't immune to these will take quite a bit of damage. Old Slag Andrea goes down in under 60 seconds. You'll notice the damage from our hits isn't amazing, which is due to the poison infusion, but this won't really be an issue until we encounter some bosses immune to poison and bleed in the DLC. Also, weirdly, Poison Infusion compared to all the other infusions actually gives a boost to the base damage of the claws. I'm not sure if this is a glitch or a developer oversight or if there is some kind of logical reason for it, but anyway, I'm certainly not complaining. For leveling up, Dexterity is going to be a crucial stat for us. It improves the damage of the claws, but more importantly it improves how fast Bleed and Poison activate on enemies. You can further improve Bleed by boosting Faith and Poison by boosting Adaptability. I'll most likely do Adaptability for the iframes as well, but I don't imagine I'll level Faith up as I still want to put some points into health and stamina as well. There's a couple of useful rings I want to get also, so first thing we do is get this ladder set up so we can descend into the pit. With some well-timed parkour, we get to Grave of Saints to fight the Royal Rat Vanguard. Not sure why you'd get a bunch of giant rats to guard a van, but anyway, once Stripe appears, I get poisoned instantly, but still turn it into some rat sashimi, which sounds absolutely disgusting. The reason I want to do this boss is to join the Rat King Covenant afterwards, which gives us the Crest of the Rat, a ring that increases our ability to activate poison on enemies even further. Next, I relive some Elden Ring PTSD and head to the gutter to pick up this Spoken of Tight in a chest here. We've now got another annoying optional boss, the Executioner's Chariot. After getting these guys to wander off to their demise and then slashing this annoying red phantom down to a similar fate, it's horse time. The mage gets absolutely cracked and the chariot takes out the skeletons, which is handy. The horse itself is no issue. We tear through over half its health before it even really has a chance to do anything. Unlike rat sashimi, horse sashimi is actually a thing in some countries in the world, but I still found this prospect a bit gross, so I just went to partner up with this guy with a blood fetish instead. Crest of Blood is a ring that increases our ability to bleed enemies even further, which is again perfect for this build. I've pretty much got everything we need right now, so the only changes for a while will be some more level ups and maybe a ring switch here and there, but otherwise it's time to show you the art of Claw. Time for a bit of cleanup, and I realised I never actually did Flexile Sentry. This was another fight that went about 40 seconds. Not really surprising, I guess. I banished him from this plane. He's been sent into Flexile. Well, what shall we tick off next? Rune Sentinels? Yeah, that sounds good. These ladies are very weak to poison, so the first goes down very quick. It still got a little hairy with two of them on me at once, but one of them goes down and it's back to one-on-one. The attacks are few and quite easy to work around, so the Rune Sentinels got ruined and sent to hell. Have I actually created a strong build here? Emerald Herald mentions a shard for something, not sure what that means, and I start leveling up adaptability for the first time. Iframes and poison increase, what's not to love? So, Iron Keep. You know, I've spent way too much time ranting in my videos about how much I hate this area, so I'm going to avoid doing that here. But let me just raise this one point. How is it this guy can get shot in the back by me with a giant ballista at point blank range, but not aggro, while this guy aggroes from a literal other dimension? But, disregarding that, our claws handle the enemies in this area quite well. I got to Smelter Demon, who is thankfully vulnerable to poison, which helps considerably. The poison doesn't last for too long, and Smelty has a fair bit of health. Couple that with our low damage per hit, and it could make this tricky. But I know its moveset very well by this stage, so it's another first try victory. I'm just going to say it, I'm really loving this build, it's awesome. I treated some new friends to an Iron Keep Spar session, and then got through to deactivate the fire and light this bonfire. For the first time in a few bosses, I did suffer a death here at the hands of the old Iron King. I messed up a dodge and fell into his famous little lava pit in the middle of the arena, where he had about as little health left as possible, which was painful. Second try though, I was slightly less penisy and ironed out the king without too much trouble. Just gotta wait for those fist slams or the laser beam, as those are prime opportunities to attack. But our first great soul is done. We're pivoting around quite a bit, but here's the Belfry Gargoyles now. If you saw my throwing knife video, you'll know they're weak to poison, and one proc is enough to kill a gargoyle outright, which is great for us. I went to grab the Bastille key and take on the Lost Sinner, but I realised I had no flame butterflies on me, so I couldn't actually light the torches in the boss room. I was way too lazy to go get some and come back, so I thought I'd just try without, just to really put the dark in Dark Souls 2. Lost Sinner can't be locked onto while the lights are out, but at least it's not so dark you can't see her. She's vulnerable to both poison and bleed, and by now you've gathered that any enemy that's dual vulnerable to our status conditions isn't going to have the best time. Great Soul number 2 is acquired. Wish.com Qualag is our next target. Obviously she's immune to poison because you know Scorpion and all that, but she can be bled, so that's something. The fixed 200 bleed damage is definitely dropping off. It's a shame there's literally no way to increase that, but I guess it would make some bosses ridiculously easy. In any case, victory is ours once again. You sensing a theme here? We've been breezing through quite a bit. I hope we get something soon that causes me a bunch of deaths and aggro. Ah, here we are. So, hitting the rats at close range with the claws seems nigh impossible. I tried my neat L2 spinning attack on them, but that didn't work. I tried heavy poise armor, but that didn't help. In the end, I opted for witch's urns on the little ones, which worked a treat. Once they're dead, the big guy is relatively easy by comparison. He really is just a corrupt-a-wish Sith. Weirdly, he can actually be poisoned, which I wasn't expecting. Pitiful souls and a pitiful boss soul are our rewards. In a step I could have taken earlier but totally forgot about, I went to get the Ring of Blades +1 from this Pursuer wannabe, and then went to light up the bonfire at Brightstone Cove. You know, and you'll hear me repeat this a few times, it's mega satisfying to be able to attack enemies before they hit me for once. Well, we've got a boss which is a group of religious enemies in a room. I wonder how this will compare to the last time we faced a boss like this. Okay, well this was significantly easier than deacons with throwing knives. Surprising that, isn't it? The most undeserving Titanite slab as a reward ever. The claws are putting in good work. We slashed up this spider guy into such small pieces that he was able to phase through this wall. To kind of make up for just running through a lot of the areas on the throwing knife runs, I actually killed a lot of these spiders for once, which was fun, because I hate these guys. Duke's dear Freya has 2 heads, but I have 2 claws, so it's a totally fair fight. Normally, I bust out the torch to keep these baby spiders at bay, but I've committed to this power stancing, so I'll do it without. Freya can't be poisoned, but she can be bled, so the damage here is pretty good again. This doesn't take very long, and the baby spiders weren't an issue. With enough circling, slashing, Freya goes down, and that's our 3rd Great Soul acquired. Our last Great Soul awaits us in the gutter, so let's dive right in. I light the bonfire at the Black Gulch mouth, and we engage the Rotten. This boss is vulnerable to both bleed and poison, but I still got careless and got crushed by that grab attack one time. Other than that, this is pretty straightforward. I'll go out on a limb and say this was the easiest of the Great Four. Claw Derp looks like he's about to fall asleep, he's so bored. Oldia then appears, and I skip through his dialogue without listening to a single word of it, because all I can think about is how boring that boss fight is going to be. Before exiting the Black Gulch, we quickly run down to slay these giants. Poison is 100% the best way to deal with them, and this nets us the Forgotten Key and one of the 5 souls of a giant. I also lured Woodland Child in here to his demise, he's just too gullible. So now, we can finally get to Dranglake Castle, and this is especially significant for this run, because Chancellor Veliger, anyway, this guy is here who is the only NPC to sell infinite repair powders. I haven't needed them so far, but I've no doubt I will as we get later into the game. This knight gets cut, this knight gets stuck, and Nameless Usurper cannot compete with the speed of our blades. This build is awesome! What do you think happened to the Twin Dragon Riders? They were still mad about that swan thing from earlier, but I put them out of their misery, so no hard feelings. Claw versus Claw, eh? Yeah, have some of that. God damn it. No more fireballs. Seriously, no one likes you guys. Time for Looking Glass Night. I'm not really sure what happened at the beginning here, but I can say for sure our normal damage is pretty bad. If the knight wasn't vulnerable to poison, this would be a long fight, but thankfully the damage over time in conjunction with our claw swipes helps us to go through the Looking Glass and succeed. Ready for joy? I'm hoping our build will cut through this quickly. Most of the mages are fine, but it's always this bit at the end with the 2 archdrakes which causes me issues, and of course this time is no exception, with a 3rd archdrake appearing from somewhere because of course it does. After a couple of tries, I just ran through and made it by the skin of my teeth, leaving us free to slash through this giant bug and make our way to the boss fight with Froggy style. Given that this amphibian abomination is weak to both bleed and poison, you can probably guess how this went. The poison is especially useful as it allows us to keep dealing damage to Demon of Song even while he's cocooning in his frog skin shield. Another first try victory for us. We can now access the shrine to restore our humanity at will, once we slash through this pyromancer of course, and now our handsome chap has his beautiful form back. I nip back here to see through Stan to buy repair powders. He also sells the bracing knuckle ring +1, which I will come back and get later, but right now I don't want to sacrifice a ring slot. Oldia blocks the way with more lore exposition, which I completely ignore, and we move on to take on Gull Velstad. He can be poisoned and bled, but has pretty high resistances to both, and of course our normal attacks do not very much damage. Luckily though, Phase 2, both the transition and his projectile attack, provide large windows for us to get damage in and proc the statuses, which is bad news for him. Poison finishes him off, and we can run past Naked Vendrick to grab the King's Ring, which will allow us to enter Uldia's Keep. We engage in a deadly duel with the fiercest swordsman in all of Mirror. And avoid these comment section trolls to take on the real Ian the Guard Dragon. The general rule for this run is if they're vulnerable to poison and bleed and don't resist both, then you can pretty much tell the fight's going to be okay. Ian said, "I'm getting too old for this ceaseless discharge," and retired to a small island off the coast of Majula to a Red Drake retirement community. We enter Dragon Eyrie, and I realise that I am in fact an absolute idiot. I previously complained about that statue blocking the bridge despite there being ample space to get past it, but somehow I never noticed this ladder here which takes you all the way through to the end of the area. Thus, there's actually no need to use a fragrant branch of yore if you don't need any items. Clearly, I am very observant. Uldia appeared yet again, this time having shrunk himself down to a size relative to how much I care about his dialogue. Poison is about the single most useful thing you can have in this area, as all the enemies are vulnerable to it, and it pretty easily depletes their massive health bars, including Gaia the Dragon Champion here at the top. 10 points for anyone who gets that reference, comment below if you did. Time for what is one of the worst dragon fights in the whole series. Ancient is an appropriate word to use to describe this boss, because that's how old I usually feel by the time its health bar depletes. Saying that though, on this run, this was actually a pretty quick Ancient Dragon fight. Maybe the fastest I've ever had at 4 minutes. Poison and bleed really helped. I still had to use 2 repair powders to stop my claws from breaking, but other than that, I stuck to his back toes the whole time. This strategy is a bit cheap, but this boss as a whole is pretty cheap, so there you go. With Ashen Mistheart in hand, we head back into the war times of Dranglake, grab some more giant souls, and fight the Giant Lord. Once again, another slow-moving boss that's susceptible to both bleed and poison, so this was pretty smooth. We slash the hell out of his ankles, and down he goes. We now have all 5 giant souls, so we can take on Vendrick. He's immune to poison, which is a little annoying, but he can be bled, so that's something. He still has a fair bit of health, but nothing close to Ancient Dragon. The only awkward thing is our claws missing because of the way he stands. The trick is to stay to his side towards the back, but don't go all the way behind him, as that triggers him to jump backwards. With the right positioning, this is a cakewalk. Vendrictory is ours. With all that wrapped up, we can take on the final bosses of the base game, providing I don't die of old age waiting for this door to open. First up, it's Throne Watcher and Throne Defender. The biggest challenge in this fight is finding time to heal, as one of them will usually rush you as you do it. Thankfully, they can both be poisoned and bled, although it does take a fair few hits to get it done. I also need to get both of them low on health before I kill one of them, otherwise one can revive the other, which is pretty annoying. It was a fight of patience, with a couple of scary moments towards the end, but luckily I was able to take down Throne Watcher before she started to revive her buddy. Bleed helped a lot to push the damage over the edge. Without even a moment's reprieve, Nashandra joins the fray. I had hoped to complete this fight without getting cursed, which I was on track to do, but unfortunately she spawned the cursed mobs near me towards the end, causing me to get cursed and vastly decreasing my max health. We still pulled out the victory as there's not too much to worry about from any of her other attacks, but this puts us on the back foot for the third and final boss, Uldia. Embarrassingly, I actually died to Uldia. I somehow hit the left D-pad and put one of my claws away and didn't even notice. I corrected it and tried to get some hits in, but unfortunately I left myself open to get hit by his charged projectile. Second attempt went much better. He can be poisoned, but it takes a lot of consecutive hits, something I'm not often able to get due to his shield. Patience is really the only skill required in this fight, and after a lot of slashes, Groot goes down, and we have officially completed the base game with claws. I opted for the throne ending as I never seem to choose this for some reason, and watch a bunch of unskippable credits while contemplating my next move. So, of course we're going to do the DLC, but I'm going to be doing things in a bit of a weird order. You see, some bosses are immune to poison and bleed entirely, so I'm going to do the bosses vulnerable to poison first, after which I'll change my infusions to suit the remaining battles. So, we're actually going to start with the Ivory King DLC first. For the first time in ages, I actually killed all the enemies on the way, including claw flicking this corpse into a wall. Except this room. Screw this room. We get Eye of the Tiger for the thrill of the fight, and then I stood up to the challenge of my rival, who in this case was Lemon. Arva the King's Pet is our first boss, and probably the first really tricky one that can be both bled and poisoned. This boss's attacks just always seem to catch me, which leaves me feline annoyed. Arva also seems to have a debuff which causes my weapon durability to fall faster than usual, so I decided that, as Arva's poison resist is through the roof anyway, it's not likely that the poison boost from Crest Ring of the Rat will be helping that much, so I swap it for the Bracing Knuckle Ring +1 to greatly reduce the rate weapon durability decreases. The difference is really noticeable, and I'm confident that this was the right call. Weaving it in and out with fast slashes make this a really fun fight. It's claw versus claw effectively. With enough dodging and weaving, we overcome this boss and clear up the blizzard across this area. I have a bit of fun slashing up these hooded buggers and also the white covetous demon, which I swear has more health than most of the bosses in this game. Our next stop is unfortunately to grab the garrison ward key and head to the Frigid outskirts, where I am 100% save stating as I've spent way too much of my life running through this area. The two tigers were annoying as usual. I died to some insane camera meltdown. I don't even know what happened to me here. Like Arva, they can be poisoned, but it takes a lot of hits. Bleed seems to be more viable, and at least they have way less health than Arva did. There's only two pretty hairy, or should I say furry, bits in this fight. The first is when both cats are active. It can be really hard to keep track of both, especially when you forget to look at durability and then this nightmare-inducing message pops up on screen. Once it's down to just Zalen, it gets a lot easier, until the second challenge part occurs when it applies the buff which makes it regenerate health and gets an attack power boost. One thing that was lucky was I was able to proc poison just beforehand, which negated some of its health regeneration. After some patience, Zalen also gets sent to the litter box. Thank God that's out of the way early. I did also attempt the Ivory King here, and while I probably could have done it right now, poison takes an enormous amount of hits to proc, and I'd rather use a different infusion. Don't worry, this is getting done, I'm coming back to it a little later. First, we're going to make a detour to the Sunken King DLC to tackle everyone's favourite gank fight. It's the usual large amounts of running away, but poisoning them does definitely speed this up as it does a good amount of damage to them. Once it's down to Varg, he does annoyingly decide to heal from time to time, but it's not enough to make a huge difference and poison still wrecks him. But now, the real prize. Some serious fashion. This skirt has surprising defense for something so light, and I couldn't help but equip it. It also gives more vigor and endurance, but the fashion is really what it's all about. Our last stop before an infusion change is the Iron King DLC, and for the first time ever I got through this room on my first attempt thanks to the barrel guy strategy. I've never actually managed to get this to work before. I also comfortably handled these guys who normally outspeed me with their attacks, and I was quicker than Quicksword Rachel. Our last poison build boss is the Blue Smelter, unironically one of my favourite fights in the game. Poison for sure helps a lot, but it has a lot of health, so this takes a while. Staying up close is 100% the best way to avoid its attacks, for the most part. Just make sure to keep an eye on health, as the blue flames do drain you if kept unchecked. After enough strikes and poison, Smelter Blue disappears from view, and it's now time to look at changing infusions. First, I changed to Magic Infusion on both, and returned to the Sunken King DLC for Alana. Immune to both poison and bleed, but weak to magic, so our damage is pretty decent here. The skeletons can be taken out quite easily as well, so things are going alright so far, but we all know the big issue comes when Velstadt comes into play. Now initially, I did try to take him out as well, but he just took so many hits that I actually found it more effective to kite him and then run for a few hits on Alana. Rinse and repeat, and Alana Del Rey goes down. I now return to the Iron King DLC, this time with lightning infused claws to take on Fume Knight. Rami Malek is immune to poison and bleed, but lightning does okay damage. His first phase is very straightforward, and the classic circle strafe strat works a treat, as long as you roll at the right time for the big sword swings, that is. Phase 2 is tougher for sure, but I still pull out the win in a photo finish. Time to celebrate with the Dance of 1000 Claws. With that ancient tradition out the way, we now finish up the Iron King DLC with Sir Alon. The most challenging thing here is figuring out when to heal, as even when you think you're safe, he can very quickly come after you with the charge attack. I also was misled by the wiki to believe that he can't be bled, but it seems that isn't true. Regardless, I powered through, taking my time and just not getting too greedy, which is often the killer in this fight. I punish his swipes, and Alon is gone, and it's time for the final infusion of this run. Bleed Infusion. That's right, we're going all out on the bleed for these last two bosses. First up is Sin, who's obviously immune to poison because, yeah, poison dragon, right? He can be bled though, which is good. I thought this was going to be a weapon durability nightmare because of his skin just destroying weapon durability, but actually the bracing knuckle ring really put in the work here for us. We chop through Sin's health and put this dragon back into a slumber, only it's an eternal one this time. At last, we return for the Ivory King. I'm gonna let this one speak for itself.
A Norfolk night, the world is cold. We stand surrounded, we are not alone. Within my reverie, there's holy light. Without a number, we stand and fight. A Norfolk night, the world is cold. We stand surrounded, we are not alone. Within my reverie, there's holy light. Without a number, we stand and fight. We are not alone. We are not
So, with that wrapped up, we got the power of the crowns from Vendrick, and we now can't go hollow anymore. I mean, that would have probably been useful about 30 hours ago, but better late than never, I guess. This run was awesome. Maybe my favourite Dark Souls 2 build so far. I'd highly recommend trying this out. Fast and fun, always exciting. If you liked the video, make sure to like and leave a comment below, and subscribe for more content. Let me know if you want to see more Dark Souls 2 runs. I've actually been quite enjoying these. I've been JK Leeds. Have a good one, and see ya.